All right, you are tuned into MMA Canada and very excited to be speaking to an individual readying to compete on April 3rd as part of the looming PFL 2025 World Tournament season. And we've got Movlid Khaybulaev taking on Jeremy Kennedy. And great getting to have Jeremy on MMA Canada today. How are you doing there, Jeremy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just kind of curious how I guess this present situation feels for you because like you were with PFL previously and then, kind of plying your trade with Bellator for a stretch. Like how does it feel? Does it feel like a new sort of thing in terms of like PFL seems to have like restructured a bit since like the previous time you were there? Does it feel kind of similar or like maybe an altogether newer experience?
Yeah, I would say like all together, just like a second stint, like a different. I'm in a different time in my career. Um, yeah, the promotion is in like a different landscape of tournaments, and it's not a season point or anything like that. So, yeah, I feel like it's just like a new fresh start for me.
And it seems like they've restructured I guess like the season a little bit, like more of like a single elimination style and more of like a clearly defined bracket. I mean, not that you would overlook the immediate challenge of the fight that you have, but it seems like just with this present field and how they're structuring it, it would seem like you have some semblance of an idea as to who your subsequent opponent could be. Do you almost prefer that way of doing it, that more single elimination style, as opposed to the more nebulous matchmaking components with like the points kind of dictating that and all?
Yeah, like I would say, I wasn't a huge fan of the points in the season format. It made it hard to like everyone would always say, "Oh, I need 6 points," but everyone at the end of the day is just trying to win these fights. And when you're fighting the best guys in the world, it's very hard. So you might not always see the best guys. It's a lot of matchmaking made on that. Like if a guy gets a good matchup and he gets a first round knockout, and then you got a killer who fights two other killers and he skates by with two decision wins and he only has 6 points, and the guy with the finish gets pushed ahead, and just there's a lot of things like moving parts in that, where here it's pretty simple, it's pretty easy to understand. You win, you move on. You lose, you go home. And you win, you know who's in your bracket, you know who you're fighting, when you're fighting. There's no politics about it. There's no matchmaking. There's no behind the scenes. This guy's fighting that guy in the round robins like before. Where this one is originally, like, once all these first matchups are out, now it's out in the open. Now everybody knows who potentially is fighting who from the beginning, and I think that helps with the, for lack of a better word, casuals. For the 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 average fan doesn't understand the point systems and the first round finish and third round finish and regular season. Like, they just want to see, oh, this guy won, this guy won, and you want to see the winners fight winners. So I think this format of a tournament, a Grand Prix, is definitely the way to go, and I think it's gonna attract a lot more eyes and just carry more interest all the way through. And it's something they adapted from Bellator, so it's pretty cool to come over with Bellator and bring this format in. I missed the Bellator 145 Grand Prix. Like, I just signed with them in 2020 when they had just started it. So I'm excited to be a part of something like this. And I like my matchup. I like the brackets. It's just motivating for me, man.
And kind of an interesting matchup here because I mean Movlid Khaybulaev is someone who definitely is a familiar name to people that actively follow the PFL circuit. And speaking of, tournament championships, someone who garnered that distinction in 2021 and obviously undefeated fighter, a lot of big names on his resume. Like, what are your thoughts on, I guess, Khaybulaev's resume and just the skill set that you see him presenting in the smart cage and all?
Man, he's really good. Obviously, you don't get to that record without being good. I think a lot of it is just, this game is crazy, and things happen at the right time, and very good career management. And he did have a stumble loss, and get it overturned. I was in the same boat, so I can't really say anything on that. The fight with Andre Harrison, but way back then, he lost 2 rounds to one, but the first round at the last 10 seconds, he dropped him, so he got a 10-8, which caused it a draw. Like, just a lot of these little things to keep that unblemished record intact. So to me, when I look at it, he's a very battle tested, good guy, but no different than fighting Patricio, who had a handful of losses, or Braga, who has a couple losses, or anybody. Like all these guys have losses, you know. So him being undefeated doesn't factor into me at all. He's got a great record. He's got good wins, but I don't think he's fought anybody with my skill set. Somebody that's going to match him where he's not he likes to wrestle and stay content and gets the takedown, secures it, and kind of gets comfortable, you know. And I won't allow that. I can't allow that. And I don't do that in my fights. You know, nobody wrestles me. You know, I typically do the wrestling. So it's interesting to see. I think both of us, you know, I've trained with him, so we both know what we're in for. And I know it's not going to be a cakewalk, but I also know, you know, I know he knows the same thing, you know, because he's not going to be able to just walk in and have this big wrestling advantage like he's had over every other opponent he's had. So I think it's we're going to bring the best out of both of us here.
Yeah, and you mentioned working with him. Like, was there anything that you could glean from that? Like, it seems like you did maybe take away some things from those training sessions. And I mean, you work with so many people who are, very active on the ground and whatnot. So I would think your, I guess, ability to kind of deal with that and everything would be of an elite caliber. But like, did you glean a lot from those sessions that you had previously with Khaybulaev? It would seem like it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really talk too much about like the training room. Obviously, there were competitive rounds, everything we did, but that alone just shows you like um, the wrestling is very competitive, you know, and that's something he really relies on. And I pride myself on being very well rounded, but I also pride myself on being one of the better MMA grapplers in the game. Um, so I think when you add that in, we're going to see a lot of striking from both of us. It's going to be our P's and Q's on the wrestling has to be there. And I pride myself on conditioning. So wrestling is hard. Wrestling is a tiring sport. But I know I can do that for 15 minutes if I have to. Um, he's had issues with his gas tank before in the cage. I can't speak on that for training. You know, and he was good when we trained. We trained a lot in 2021. The year he actually won it, I was over in Bellator. I was training with those guys a lot, and then actually just as recent as like January, I was helping Islam out for his last fight, ended up being Moicano, but it was Tsarukyan. And Movlid, he was in the room. We were training together because he had no plans of doing the tournament, and I was doing the tournament, and so we were training. And that is probably the only thing I take from it is that he retired in 2023, you know, and then when we spoke, he's like, you know, maybe I might come back for one fight. He was hinting at like maybe trying to fight Pitbull or just a one-off fight. Like he wasn't interested in the tournament. And then, you know, something changed, obviously, change of heart, and he's in the tournament now, and we ended up being matched up first. But that just shows me that he's kind of, you know, half in, half out. You know, these last 2 years, he's been training like he's not like he's retired, and I've been training to fight the best fighters in the world. So I think that's a big difference in any gap that there might have been 5 years ago. I just think I've improved, and he's probably just, you know, leveled out, just helping his teammates out.
Yeah, and that is a, fair point. I did notice that as well, just the hiatus from the sport. And you did mention the work with Islam Makhachev and then the subsequent last minute, I mean, literally last minute change in opponent, just so tight to the actual fight. I'd be curious to get your insights on the totality of that whole timeline, just, training with Islam Makhachev leading into that fight and just, how he adapted to the switch from Tsarukyan to Moicano and the overall performance, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, they were in Vegas for probably his last like 3 or 4 weeks of camp before, because the fight was in LA. And I'm out here in Vegas. We have the same manager, so Ali, you know, got us in contact, and I like working with that whole team. You know, Khabib team. I've got along with them. Like I said, 5 years ago, we were training at the Apex during COVID. So I'm really familiar with them, and I like that style because it's my style. And I like the way they train. So I just any opportunity I can, I jump in with them, and it was just nice to see how the guy, he's pound for pound best, you know, and I got to see. I didn't see his last week because they went over to LA. But him being 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, what he does, his day to day, his morning session, his evening session, how many rounds he spars, everything like that. I was just like picking their brains constantly and adapting, just so I know, like, when I get close, this is if Islam's doing this, like it's okay. So yeah, I was just kind of picking the brains on how they structure camps, and they don't really necessarily train for specific fighters. They just train to be the best them, and that's what I've really adapted from too. Especially how my last few have gone, with Gallagher to Pitbull, and then Pinedo to Braga. In this being a tournament, I could end up fighting any of these guys, the alternates or whatever. So I've just really adapted of just being the best me, and not necessarily focusing so much on my opponent. Just making sure I'm in shape, making sure my weight's good, making sure my striking's sharp, my grappling feels good, I'm healthy, and so that shows that when there is a last minute change like he got, he's good to go. He doesn't matter. He's the best him. So Islam is the best version of himself. So it doesn't matter who's across from him. And I've kind of just took that as well, just because of how my last few went and the kind of structure I'm in now.
And it's so wild too, because I mean, Habib, obviously one of the all-time great mixed martial arts competitors there's been, but really making a case for his place in terms of like all-time great MMA coaches. Can you kind of speak to that as someone who's
Yeah,
kind of, I guess, been under his like coaching purview and everything?
yeah. I mean, he's a guy that just everyone has respect for him. So he tells you jump, you say how high, and he's a hard worker. So he makes the room work, and it's good, man. And his style, and they all have such a good similar style, and like all of them are so good that you're constantly getting better, and that's why I love that room. And Khabib, he has no, I'm sorry for swearing, but no bullshit. Like there's no talking during class training, and you're just focused, and you get the work in, and you go home and you rest, and then you come back. And like I was, one of our guys went to Mexico, and he's like giving them gears for going on vacation. He's like, "You want to be a champion, or you want to go on vacation?" So he flew home early to continue training, like just things like that. He's just he demands hard work, and he has respect from everybody. So it just it helps.
And I feel like you'd be a great person to offer insights into this subject, considering your, I guess, experiences with Islam Makhachev in a training room kind of context, coupled with how prolific you are in the featherweight landscape and how many great elite featherweight fighters you've competed against. Like, there's a certain amount of discourse about Islam Makhachev potentially fighting Ilia Topuria. If that fight took place, like, what are your thoughts on that whole situation and everything? Just, I guess, the discourse around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only real Ilya has a puncher's chance against anybody in the world, and I think that would pretty much that's what I would give him. Size, Islam's bigger. He's grappling with for sure Islam's just solid everywhere. Even the striking, it'd be a competitive striking match, strictly striking. But again, 4 ounce gloves, Ilya touches anybody, that could happen. But I think if those guys fight 9 times out of 10, Islam wins. But again, if they were to fight tomorrow, if Ilya catches them, I could see it. I could see it going that way as well. So I think that's a risk that anybody who fights Ilya is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I did mention how, pedigreed you are in terms of like all the elite featherweights you've competed against. Someone who obviously fits well within that is Alexander Volkanovski, who you since have
Yeah,
become training partners with at Bang Tao. I saw that was cool. You guys
yeah,
getting in that work and all. So just curious to get your thoughts on that looming fight with Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez at UFC 314 for the vacant featherweight title.
yeah, man. I think Volk wins that one. Just strictly, I honestly, if I were to be a prediction, I would say it goes very similar to Volk and Yair Rodriguez. So he'll be dangerous early on, but then that pressure and that pace and the ground and pound and the up and the downs should be too much. And I could see it being a late TKO with ground and pound or a decision for Volk. But I just think he's way too complete, and Lopez has shown kind of some weaknesses there. when the fight goes late, when it goes later. Even with his contender series fight with drawing a blank on his name right now. Um, what's his name? Gonna help me out here.
Sorry, who's
The
contender series fight?
Diego Lopez.
Yeah, I'm also
He
blanking on the
lost
name. Yeah.
to Danny
Respectfully.
Motherfucker. Yeah. So, anyways, he slowed down on his contender series fight, and he slowed down against Danny Ige, my training partner, and you see little things. He's very dangerous early on, but Volk is on for 25 minutes straight. No matter what, you're not going to deter him from any kind of game plan or mental lapse or anything, and I think that's going to be the difference.
Yeah, no, I definitely get where you're coming from. It's just a very interesting, I don't want to say crossroads fight in a sense, because I feel like Volk still has more gas in the tank, but just in terms of how established he is compared to, Lopez more so being, I guess, on the rise
Yeah,
comparatively, or at least hasn't got as
yeah,
much underneath him, I suppose.
yeah. But I feel like that's what you're going to get for the next little while with contenders outside of Max. All these guys are all like going to be their first crack at the title, um, coming up now. So it's like a whole new crop of guys coming up. So I think if Volk wins, he's still going to have to deal with a Mosvar or Leron Murphy or these guys that are coming up still. There's no real like long time staples in the sport that are high up. Maybe Emmett, but I don't think he gets it done against Murphy either. So yeah, I think you're going to see the next couple title fights going to be a lot of fresh blood.
I was actually going to ask you about that Emmett versus Lerone Murphy fight. That's interesting that you also touched upon that because I noticed you'd had a
Yeah,
canceled bout with him circa August 2016. So, yeah, it seems like you very
way back.
attentively follow the landscape.
Yeah, and well, I that was who I was supposed to make my debut against in the UFC, and then Laurent Murphy, I trained with out in Thailand for a while. I think he had just got in the UFC. He had just fought Zubara, so we got some work in. So I'm familiar with him as well. Again, he ended up fighting Dan, my training partner. So I'm just well versed in my division, and even in the UFC, I follow along with all these guys, training with Bryce Mitchell out here, Andre Feely, like all these guys that are in the UFC, John Silva, like you get a taste of so many guys when you're out here, that are coming to the town, and then when I go to Thailand, it's also like the Vegas of Southeast Asia. You got a bunch of people out there as well. So I'm just well versed in training with a lot of different people that fight at the higher levels, and really trained with in my division, which is not even in the bracket. Is I've worked a lot with Brendan Loughnane, but outside of that, anybody in the PFL I've kind of stayed away from. But UFC, your fair game, training partners, and that's about it, really, man. I just like looking for hard work, and Aljamain Sterling's been helping me out a lot for this camp as well. He's a good featherweight now too. So yeah, I just well versed in the landscape of featherweights.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was going to ask you about that Mitchell Silva fight coming up because I'd seen you trained with Mitchell, but wasn't necessarily privy to the fact that you trained with Silva. So perhaps that would be not exactly the fight to get your
So
insights on per se, just the connectivity to both, I guess.
I mean, yeah, you know how that fight goes. If huge grappling advantage for Bryce Mitchell, huge striking advantage for Silva. So if Silva can get his hands on him before Bryce can get him down, then you know how it. You never really know until they get a hold of each other. But from grappling both and working with both, it's a striker versus grappler matchup, that one.
And when I was preparing to do this interview, I was kind of marveling at how many localized insights that you have on this UFC 314 card specifically, because I mean, you mentioned Yair Rodriguez before, and you've previously fought Patricio Pitbull for the Bellator featherweight title, and he's
Yeah,
readying to make his debut against Yair Rodriguez. Like, what are your thoughts on that matchup? Because it seems like a particularly fascinating one.
that one hurts me, man. Every time I see Pitbull's face, I just get angry. But that's just the competitiveness to me. That fight was going my way, and I made a, made some mistakes and had a bad camp, and the list goes on. But I do think Pitbull's nearing the end, and that was already a year ago now. Um, he's got very good distance management. And Yair is always he's never really impressed me. I mean, he's really good. He kicks hard. He broken feet against Holloway. He's still blasting his legs, and he's got grit. But I think he can catch Pitbull. But if he doesn't catch Pitbull, I see Pitbull winning that one at a pretty safe, controlled fight over 3 rounds. And then again, yeah, if we're touching on that whole card, you got Dan Ige, my good training partner against Sean Woodson. I think he gets it done. I think he catches Woodson. Just tall, body type wise. I think Dan fights well against those kind of guys. And then Julian Rosa, another one of my good training partners, fighting Darren Elkins. That's just like two of the same people fighting each other. It's going to be a car crash. And I think Rosa wins that one as well.
Yeah, just, again, like to your point, speaks to the depth of that card and specifically even with the, featherweight fighters and stuff like that. So yeah, it seems like a
Yeah,
great time in general for the 145-pound weight category.
exactly. And that's why I'm excited to get my victory on the third and get to watch these fights on the fifth with Murphy and Emmett, and then on the 12th you got Volkanovski, you got Dan Ige, you got Julian Erosa, you got Patricio Pitbull, you got Bryce Mitchell. So it's an exciting times for my division, and I just want to make sure everything is funner on a win. So I just want to be sit back, enjoying my food, looking at my next opponent, which is going to be in the next side of the bracket. And I'll be 8, 9 weeks out again, and happy times, man. 1 week away. 1 week away.
And I was going to inquire if you had any particular thought on, entertaining to get your ideal outcome, obviously, but like who do you, I guess, foresee fighting in the semifinals? Do you have maybe like a clear idea of who will emerge victorious in that Nathan Kelly versus Tae Jun Kim fight?
I'm glad you said his name because couldn't even remember his name. I know it's Kim, Korean guy. I don't know much about him. I know Nate Kelly, and I've crossed paths with him in Thailand and in Dubai as well, so I'm familiar with him. Um, I'm not really looking past that at all, though. To me, it's Movlid or bust. I've got a big task ahead of me. Obviously, he's probably the hardest matchup, and I'm happy I get him early. I get him first. I get him off of his layoff. Um, and then we'll see what happens April 4th, and what happens on the other side of the bracket. The only thing I can hope is Braga and Borix. They somehow one of those two make it to the finals because I want my redemption. It would be pretty cool if it was Borix, just because we're the only two real longtime Bellator guys in this tournament, and he's one that I really wanted to get back. So if he could get through Pinedo and then the winner of Landu and Braga, then that would be, a pretty Cinderella story for me to win the title, win the tournament while avenging my loss. So that's kind of the only outcome on the whole tournament I care about is Borix or Braga doing well on the other side. But my side of the bracket, I beat Movlid, and I don't care who else it is.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It speaks well to, I guess, the structure of the overall tournament, though, and then the narrative components that attach themselves to you and everything like that. So, yeah, I get that distinction where you're
Yeah,
just so locked in on this fight, but at the same time, it's kind of cool to see what's happening on the other side of that bracket, and then even what could transpire on your side of the bracket as well. So, yeah, just good to have those clearly defined terms, I guess.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. And I guess just one of the last things I kind of wanted to touch on in a way, just because I saw you met Fedor in Saudi Arabia, and there's been
Yeah.
some rumblings of maybe Conor McGregor wanting to bring him into BKFC, like nothing necessarily solidified, obviously, but he had kind of like put that out there in like a press kind of context and whatnot. Like, what do you think about that? Is that something that would intrigue you at all? Like, what's your, I guess, general thoughts even on bare knuckle and then I guess specifically Fedor's potential inclusion?
He's the go man. I just want him to ride off into the sunset and be who everyone remembers him as. We don't care about bare knuckle. We don't care about dirty boxing or any of that kind of stuff. Me personally, I don't care to see him in any of that. So I would love for him to just be the Fedor of Fedor, and that's it. Personally,
I hear what you're saying. What was it like meeting him and everything, though? Like, I saw you guys, like I said, had the snap and everything.
yeah, he's just like a stone cold. Like I'm not a guy to take pictures with other fighters or anything, but like my wife was there. I was like, babe, you got to take a picture of this. And she's like, what? She had no idea who he was. I was like, this is like your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. This is your goat's goat. I got so it was really cool. He's like the only guy I had to like go and get a picture with him. He was awesome. It was really cool. And like receiving and receptive of it. Yeah.
Yeah, he would seem like a great guy to me. Like I know sometimes people have that classic adage of like, don't meet your heroes, but I feel like Fedor would be like one of the exceptions to that rule, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly.
But yeah, it's always great getting to talk to you, Jeremy. I appreciate you coming on the MMA Canada platform to chop it up a little bit. Super excited about this fight and just how the tournament is laid out this year and everything. But I also do want to be mindful of your time, man. So curious if perhaps you had a final parting thought you would like to add as we're kind of wrapping things up here.
No, man. No, I'm good to go. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, always great getting to chop it up. Whenever I interview you, I always still remember when you were like in some loose public discussions about being in an open weight tournament with like some
Oh
heavyweight
yeah,
fighters and stuff like that.
it's
I don't know
great.
why I always think of that.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That was forever ago.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
many cool. Yeah, no, so many cool chapters have unfurled in the story so far, and the next one taking
yeah.
place on April 3rd against Movlid Khaybulaev. Again, thanks so much for the time, man. You have a good rest of your night. All the best with the remainder of the preparations and all, and just yeah, thanks so much for the time.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.